Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is David Tucker. Throughout his career, David has served as both a pastor and technology executive. The intersection of his faith and his passion to see families wisely use technology led to the founding of digitalparenting.com. David is a husband and a father of 3. He lives in Cleveland, Tennessee. We're going to talk this morning about his book called The Digital Parenting Guidebook, 7 Essential Steps for Building the Tech-Savvy Christian Family. David, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
You've been presenting on the dangers of technology in schools and at churches and so on for the past decade or so. At those events, there are a few different types of parents, you say, that you encounter over and over. Talk a bit more about those different parenting approaches.
Oh, absolutely. So the first type of parent that I run into when it comes to technology, they'll listen, they'll be attentive, they'll be excited about the content I'm sharing, but they always come back with, I know somebody else who needs this, right? For some reason, if you really push into it with them, they'll tell you that, their kids are just, they're not going to struggle with that. That's not going to be a problem in our family, but we know it is for other families, right? The second kind of family I run into, and I can spot them coming just a mile away because they're generally coming, they're very serious. They might even have, little tears in their eyes because they've seen how technology can impact their family in a very negative way. And they really want to show other parents, they want to convince other parents, like, you need to be paying attention to this. And I really don't want any of the parents to be in either of those first two groups, right? I'd love to prevent challenges so they don't come with damage already, but I'd also love to have every family understand that they need to take this seriously. And so the third group is the group that I love the most because, they're the ones that they might not totally accept everything I say at the beginning, but they're willing to come up and ask me questions about it. They're willing to try to understand how they could implement it in their home and just have a discussion. And so that's where I want every parent to be. You don't have to just, jump in and just blindly believe everything I say, but that's part of the reason why we include so much data in the book is to really help parents understand what a real issue this can be in our current culture.
Step 1 of your 7 steps is on regulating screen time, and this is something that as parents we all really struggle with. Seemingly every form of modern entertainment is on a screen now, right? Mm-hmm. What's your advice on regulating screen time?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that we just start with families on, and this is the reason why it's step 1, is to be intentional with what you're doing with screen time. Some of the greatest challenges happen when we just default to going to screens whenever we want some type of downtime. So we work with families to get a plan together for how they're going to use screens in their home. And really the first part of it, and this kind of blows parents' minds at first, doesn't have anything to do with the kids. It has to do with the adults looking at their own screen use, coming up with a plan. If you're married, sitting down with your spouse, talking about how each of you use devices so that you can make a plan for how you can be more intentional. Now, we do give recommendations in the book for, specific amounts of screen time for your kids, depending on ages. And so that's really critical. But really the first step is just to make a decision that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be disciplined with the time I have. And the other reason why we include this as the first step is every other danger we talk about gets worse with more screen time. So there's more chances for your kids to fall into inappropriate content or to have challenges with mental health on social media if they just have limitless amounts of time to be on their devices. That's why we tackle it first.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought up mental health. I love that you had a chapter on that, safeguarding mental health. What really is the connection between social media and mental health as you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of connections we can make now. Now, we're still kind of in the early point of getting data back on this. We know that there's a connection between the amount of time your kids use social media and their satisfaction with their life. And what we're seeing is this inverse relationship where the more time your kid spends on social media, the less satisfied they become with their own life. We also see that there's a dramatic difference in how social media affects you if you're just on social media, maybe let's say 15 to 30 minutes a day versus if you're on it for 4 hours a day. And this goes back to our conversation about screen time as well. So what parents need to understand is this isn't just a subtle change that we've seen over time. When we go back, there's this inflection point that happened really between 2009 and 2011, once all teens really started to have smartphones, not just a few, but it really became the kind of a mainstream part of culture. And that's when we saw a huge change. And so when we saw Dr. Jean Twenney's book come out, talking about generations, and she just clearly stated there that every indicator of mental health has gotten worse for this generation since that point. And that's true across socioeconomic groups. That's just true across different geographic areas. So this is absolutely, parents need to have their eye on this. And a big piece of this is just having regular conversations with your children around their mental health, and also kind of giving them a hint that, hey, social media can sometimes skew your emotions and how you view your life, and helping them to see that so that they understand how it can affect them. And for parents with younger kids, helping them understand that the best decision you might be able to make is just to delay social media. The Surgeon General of the United States even said that in his view, based on the data he's read, it would be best if parents waited until 16 or later before their kids got on social media.
Step 5 is respecting yourself, respecting others. And I don't want to get overly religious here, but it seems to me from a Christian family's perspective, there are goalposts in terms of how we should treat people, including ourselves. You refer to it in the book as the biblical standard. Unpack that a little bit more for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, can you imagine if our teens, or, and I've got 3 teenagers in my home. I know some people might have younger kids, but if your kids just went online and they gauged their behavior based on how they see other people behaving, right? We'd be in a very, very bad situation very quickly. And so one of the things we just talk about is listen, the biblical standard that we're given for how we are to treat others, for how we are supposed to be the ones that are bringing peace into a situation, where we're supposed to be the ones that understand the value of every human being because they're created in the image and likeness of God. That applies online just as much as it applies offline. And so helping your children understand, it's not just saying, hey, be nice online. Like that's great, but there's a reason why, right? We're supposed to be, ambassadors for the kingdom of God in all of our interactions. And so when we look at that in terms of online behavior, we're going to have to teach our kids to do some things that don't come natural. So for example, that might mean, even though you've got, something you really want to respond to, if your kid's on social media, teach them, maybe you need to take a step back and you need to pray about your response before you actually give it. And that, again, that's not the way social media generally works. It's no, you need to respond fast. You need to respond without thinking about it. And so just teaching our kids to be a bit different. But the other side of that is also teach them the standard that they should expect to be treated online. And the reason that's important is so that you give them a framework for what to do if they're bullied online, which is becoming an increasing challenge. And especially amongst the middle school age groups, we're seeing just such an increase of focus in schools on trying to deal with this kind of epidemic. So helping your child understand, when should they come to you if they're not treated right online? When should they go to an authority figure at school if they see a classmate being bullied online, and so forth?
Such a good point. You talk in step 6 about maintaining security and privacy, the information that your child should know to never share online. Walk us through what kids should know to keep private.
Yeah, and here I want to confront a myth with this, because you have a lot of parents that what they'll do is they say, oh, well, my kid knows all about technology, right? I don't need to, they understand this stuff better than I do, so I don't need to have this conversation with them. But one of the things we've seen is some of the mental protections that we as adults have with our online interactions, something that tells us, oh, maybe I shouldn't be entering this information here. This current generation, even though they know a lot about technology, they don't have some of those safeguards. So just explaining to your child, your home address, your personal phone number, any data that's tied to, like in the US, we have social security numbers. These are things that you shouldn't just give out openly to other people. And you should also help them understand why. One of the things we do in the book is we tell a lot of stories of things that have happened to families, and we want parents to share those stories with their kids so that their child can understand, oh, if I share this, even though I think this is maybe just an innocent post, I might be revealing information about myself that somebody could use. And there's several stories in the book that cover that. And so just helping your child understand that, you can give out information that you don't intend to, and it can have some dangerous consequences.
David, before we wrap things up, I want you to touch on what I think is the $1 million question, and you kind of alluded to it before, and that's the most common question you receive, which is, when should I get my child a phone? You know where I was going with that.
Yes.
What's your personal perspective and opinion on that?
Yeah, so it's funny. Again, literally, I get this question 100 times more than I get any other question because it's become this rite of passage for us as parents. We all have to decide how to answer this question. But I generally tell parents that's not the right way to look at it. You don't just say, when's the age? So age is important, but I say you need to ask 3 questions. The first question is, have I, as a parent, taught my children how to deal with the temptations that are going to come from having a phone? And you might think I'm talking about inappropriate content here. That's certainly part of it, but it's also just the temptation of distraction, the temptation of pulling away from the physical world and pushing into the digital world. So if you can't answer yes to that question, then you shouldn't get them a phone. The next question on top of that is my child, are they mature enough to come with the responsibility of having a phone? Meaning, if they're carrying around something that's, $1,000 in their backpack or their pocket or their purse or whatever it is, do I trust that my child can manage that effectively? So that's the second question. And then the third question, and this one is in my opinion, the most critical. As a parent, do I have the time to properly train them to use that device? And if the answer to that question is no, then you shouldn't get them a phone. Now, if you answer yes to all of those questions, I do think it is important to look at age. I literally just within the last month got my twin boys, my oldest, a phone because they are going to be driving. They just turned 16 here. They just got their driver's licenses, but we chose to wait until 16. One of the things I tell parents is don't let a coach who says your kid has to have this app or a school or anybody else make that decision for you. You have to make the decision when you think your child is ready for that.
Yeah, good stuff. The Digital Parenting Guidebook, 7 Essential Steps for Building the Tech-Savvy Christian Family. David Tucker, the author, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Thanks so much for your time this morning, David.
Thank you so much for having me.